And as we inch closer to the 2012 elections, the GOP presidential hopefuls keep hammering away on the campaign trail all the reasons why Obama needs to be a one-term president. And my next guest says, well, he might as well just start calling him, President Obama, the campaigner-in-chief. And joining me now to list the reasons why he believes we should trade in President Obama's Yes We Can slogan for We Can't Wait, syndicated columnist, Fox News contributor Charles Krauthammer. Charles, welcome back, sir. Good to see you.
Happy to be here.
All right, I read your column. Why is it now we can't wait?
Well, look, he had his yes, we can. It turned out he really couldn't. So now it's we can't wait, meaning everything is the fault of the Republicans. And yet, so he keeps saying, you know, we've got to get the jobs here. We have to get all of this done, stuff I want. Now, it turns out that he had a decision to make, a very important decision, that involved thousands of really shovel-ready jobs. Big infrastructure project exactly of the kind he says he wants for America, and that jobs is number one. Also a project that would really reduce our dependence on unfriendly sources of energy abroad. This is the Keystone XL pipeline from Canada that would be carrying Alberta oil shale, down to refineries in Texas. Huge project, and the decision went to him. It had been studied for 3 years by the State Department because it's responsible if it crosses an international frontier. And it had studied it, the longest study for ecological effects of any pipeline in U.S. history. 2 conclusions, 2 studies, huge amount of research on this. It concluded there's no significant risk at all. What does Obama do? He decides he will decide unilaterally. And what does he decide? He decides to punt this. No decision, more study, for 12 to 18 months, meaning he kicked it until after the election. Well, now this is, and the excuses are, well, you know, it's going to increase global warming. This is preposterous. The Canadians have said if it doesn't go south to the United States, it's going to go west to Asia. They are not going to stop the oil sands. It will be exactly the same effect, if any, on the environment. So it will have no effect at all in changing the environment if we decide not to take the oil. And the second item about the possible danger to the U.S. Ecological structure in Nebraska and elsewhere, again, there was this huge study which said there's no significant risk. The interesting thing is that the New York Times and the Washington Post, in reporting on this, have shown how unbelievably, purely, nakedly political was the decision. The Times reports that days before the president's announcement, they had been looking for ways to put the decision past Election Day, not to improve on the pipeline or study it in any other way, to make it pass because he doesn't want to anger the people on his left, his base, who are against the pipeline. And the Post reported that one of its sources had said that the campaign people in the Obama campaign had concluded that approving the pipeline, which everybody expected, Canada expected, everybody expected, that approving it would bring them not one extra vote on Election Day. And thus, he kills the project essentially, at least for 18 months, possibly. It'll never happen if Canada heads it west. He kills it entirely for political and personal election reasons.
It's sort of like, you know, what we discovered this week about Solyndra is that they wanted the firings delayed until after the 2010 elections. So he's punting here, and that, as you point out, the risks still remain because they're going to send that oil off to China, and we're going to pay higher oil prices because, and the other fascinating thing here, Charles, is that Canada had a recession they got out of because they started drilling. Unemployment in North Dakota is 3.5% because they're drilling. It seems like the easiest way, the simplest way to get immediate jobs into the economy and help us get out of the recession. The president keeps rejecting that. So the very thing that would help him, I think it would help him in spite of what his advisors are concluding.
And especially with oil cracking $100 a barrel again, especially given that after the Gulf oil spill, he essentially shut down drilling. Now it's slightly relaxed. Yeah. But still, East Coast, West Coast are shut down. Alaska, huge restrictions. This is such an obvious source of recovery, of jobs, of income, and of independence. Otherwise, we have to depend on really unreliable countries around the world who don't like us and who would hurt us if they could.
All right,
and it also is hand in glove with what happened, for example, on this decision he made to wind down the surge in Afghanistan in September of next year. Again, it's election-driven. September makes no sense whatsoever. It's during the fighting season. You either do it earlier in the year or later in the year. And his commanders, not one commander, had recommended a winding down of the surge in September. Why did he do it? Because he wants to actually have something that he can say in the last weeks of the election. I made a promise on Afghanistan. I kept it.
That's pretty sad.
This is all about his re-election. And what galls me is that he keeps saying over and over again that Republicans are the party who put party over nation, elections over the national interest. And these are naked examples of him doing exactly what he accuses the Republicans of
It's
doing.
extraordinarily well said, as usual. But let me ask you one political question here, because you had some pretty harsh words about Herman Cain, especially on his foreign policy knowledge. These polls that have come out this week, there's 3 national polls that now have Newt ahead, and probably more importantly for a candidate, he came out, there's a poll this week that has him way up in Iowa, and now a poll out today, neck and neck with Governor Romney in New Hampshire. What do you make of his sudden rise in the polls?
Well, I'm not sure that I believe that, one poll at one time in one place indicates a sudden rise.
I'm talking about 5 separate polls here.
Look, I have nothing against Herman Cain. I think he's a terrific guy. He has a great story. I think he has terrific talents. What I'm saying is I call him like I see him. Anybody who's watched him in the debate on foreign affairs, anybody who watches response on Libya, anybody who's watched him in any talking about what's happening abroad knows, and it's rather obvious, that he's over his head and he's winging it. There's no other way to explain that Libya answer, as if Libya were some strange, obscure country, Tajikistan, which you wouldn't expect anybody to actually know a lot about. It's a story, it's a war that we've been writing about, talking about, arguing about for 8 months. And that is simply, I call it as I see it.
Oh, I got you.
It's not reflected in the polls. I'm not offended. Americans have their own opinions, and they can reject mine.
Real quick on Newt, what do you make of his rise? Can he sustain it? And do you think it may be coming down? Because we're getting very close here to vacation time and probably not as much attention on presidential politics. And January 3rd, the caucuses. Will Newt sustain his rise in the polls? Or?
Well, he's right now, this is like a cycle that we've seen over and over again. As soon as you end up in the top tier, all the artillery is shot at you. The story on Freddie and Fannie, the story on the millions he took in with his health care strategic advising. The people are going to learn about the ad he did with Nancy Pelosi, in which he spoke about global warming and the need to essentially expend a lot of money by the government to counteract it. So all of these issues, which people have not probably been aware of in the past, are going to be now out front.
All right.
And we'll have to see how he answers, how he weathers it, and whether he can make a coherent and defensible argument against all of these new news that people are going to hear.
All right, Charles.